You have to remind yourself that listening is much more powerful than talking. Whether you're listening to your families, researchers, garnering their interests, learning about them, learning about what their interests are, clinicians, other group leaders, learning from other group leaders, rather than having to be the loudest voice in the room. That's the most powerful thing you can do as a leader.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Mary Fete. She is the executive director of the National Foundation for Ectodermal Dysplasias, NFED, which is a nonprofit dedicated to improving treatment, research, and support for families affected by ectodermal dysplasias. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about Mary. Number one, she leads with listening. A registered nurse by training, Mary knows that listening is a clinical skill and a leadership one. She's brought that philosophy to NFED, ensuring the voices of families, researchers, and partners shape every step forward. Number two, Mary connects people with progress. Under her leadership, the NFED has expanded to support families in over 120 countries, launched groundbreaking initiatives like the EDE Life Clinical Trial and an AI advisory group, and championed policy efforts like the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. Her colleagues say she never tries to be the expert in the room, she brings the experts into the room. And number three, she puts people first, and it shows. Mary's approach to families is the same one she brings to donors and team members. Lead with empathy, build with trust. That ethos has helped the NFED grow its programs, its partnerships, and its impacts while still feeling like a family. Mary, you have been called many things: a nurse with a strategist's mind, a connector of families and researchers, the heart of a global rare disease movement, and a loyal St. Louis Cardinals fan. Well, today we are thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to start out because I just love your background as a nurse. I have many nurses in my family. And I know you've said that listening when you're a nurse can literally impact patient outcomes. So it's just such an important part of that role. And I wonder if you could talk about how that skill, listening, has shaped your leadership of a nonprofit, NFED.
Actually, I think it defined my leadership and my role at the NFED. And I'll just share a few stories with you. As a baby nurse, many years ago, I was assigned to a med-surg floor, and I took care of an older gentleman who had pneumonia. He was pretty sick when he came in, stabilized, his treatment was going well. All the nursing notes reflected that he was doing well, no complaints, resting quietly. But, I went in a couple of times and, I didn't make eye contact, and he looked kind of sad. So the next morning when I was reassigned to him, I sat down and I said, "Can I just sit with you for a while while you have your breakfast?" He said, "Sure, I guess so." And so we were quiet for a while. And then he said, "Did you know my wife died last month?" I said, "No, I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry." And he went on to say how sad he was. And this was the first time he was sick without his wife. He was lonely. He was afraid to go home. He hadn't been eating well, and he just lost all energy. And I sat with him for a while, and because he shared that with me, I was able to get him the right resources to go home with, right? Grief counseling, a support group, nutritional services. And, I never forgot that man, because it taught me it takes about 2 minutes to really listen to somebody and make a difference in their lives. Did I save his life? Probably not. Did I make a little impact? I hope so. And so I've never forgotten that. And I brought that with me to the NFED. And I think that's key when working with families. I'm the executive director, right? I'm the leader of the organization. but I still talk to families and individuals every day. That's my fuel, right? That's how I get my energy to do this work. A couple of weeks ago, a mom called me. Her baby was affected with one of the more severe ectodermal dysplasias, horrible skin erosions, and very big treatment challenges. And she called me. She wanted to talk to me. And, at first I'm going, oh, I can give her all these resources. And I go, let me just zip it for a while and hear what she has to say. And she really wanted to talk about how sad she was that her baby was so sick and how scared she was. And she talked about how she was taking care of the baby and she was doing all the right things, right? She just wanted to talk and be reassured that she was doing the right things. And so she called me a week later, and this time she did have some questions, and I did provide her with some resources. But we built a relationship of trust. I know she'll call me back if she needs help or if she has questions. And I think that's the whole mode of operation, right? Listen first and talk less. Really listen to
Mhm.
people so you can make an impact and you don't start talking and thinking you know what people need. So I think that's how I approach everything at the NFED is listening to our families because they set our direction. They establish what programs we need, what educational resources we need, what our research program looks like. So if we don't listen to our families, we can't fulfill our mission.
Mary, I think that is such a good reminder, not just for folks who might work with patients or families or in healthcare, but just for leaders in general. Because sometimes, you might amass a lot of knowledge about a subject and really enjoy giving advice. I love giving advice to people. And
Right.
sometimes that's really what people want, but sometimes that's not what they're asking for.
Right.
They just need someone to listen to them.
Right.
And then, like you said, maybe she came back and asked for some of that advice and resources later. Um, so you probably, I know you work with a lot of different leaders. You probably work with some leaders that are a little more ready to give advice than to listen. And I wonder if you could just share advice that you have for leaders. It's a lesson that you've learned and that you model for others. But I'd love to just hear any thoughts that you have about advice that you would give or have given to other leaders about the power of listening and how to start doing it more and doing it better.
Well, you have to make a conscious decision, right? Because your first impulse is to start talking about what you know or what you think people want to hear. So you have to remind yourself that listening is much more powerful than talking. And once you really listen to somebody, you're probably much better off, better help to be able to help them and really lead your organization, whether you're listening to your families, researchers, garnering their interests, learning about them, learning about what their interests are, clinicians, other group leaders, learning from other group leaders rather than having to be the loudest voice in the room. That's the most powerful thing you can do as a leader. And you have to
Yeah.
practice it. You have to remind yourself, I don't have to keep talking. I don't have to fill the space in the room with my voice all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good reminder. Kind of starts with being intentional and making the commitment and deciding and then, really holding yourself accountable to
Yes,
it.
yes.
I wonder if you could tell me what first drew you to NFED more than 2 decades ago? And when did you know that that was more than just a stop along your career path?
Well, that's a great question because I had just finished my master's degree in public health nursing. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to work with the community and have an impact on a community and not only just one-on-one. And so the position was open and the position was first to direct the research and treatment programs. So fortunate to get the job and even more fortunate to work with our founder, Mary Richter. She had such passion and such knowledge, and I just benefited from it so much. So I jumped in head first, both feet, tried to learn about all the syndromes, all the research, all the treatment, and really a lot to learn, like drinking from the fire hose, as they say. And then I went to my first family conference. Oh my God. We have a family conference every year, and our families come together. They support each other. We have educational programs. And of course, I had some research efforts at the first conference. I was so nervous. I was so nervous. And, I got there and these families opened their hearts to me and I gave them mine for the next 20 years. I knew that it was more than a job. I found a place, my home for the next 20 plus years. That's how I knew the families, the kids, the affected individuals, the adults, the parents that are so brave and just so resilient. I knew after that first family conference, it's life-changing, not only for our families, but for staff.
Was it tough to step into a leadership role after a founder?
It was really tough. It was really, really tough. And there was a little break. We had an interim executive director for about a year and a half, I think. So maybe that break was helpful, but it was tough. But because of her leadership and what she taught me and her vision, I felt really comfortable. Same philosophy, families first, individuals first. And so, yeah,
Yeah, sounds like you were picking up a baton with a lot of shared values around putting
absolutely.
the
That's a great way to
families
put it.
first.
And I felt that way. And I had a very close relationship with her even after she retired. Unfortunately,
Wow,
she died
that's
a
cool.
couple years ago, but she was a mentor to me. So it, it, it was a beautiful relationship. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity.
One of the things your team has said about you is that you don't try to be the expert. You bring the experts in. And I wonder if you could talk about how that mindset has shaped how NFED approaches your research and your support and your advocacy.
Well, it's impossible for me to be an expert in everything, right? There's just so much to know. No one person can be an expert. And I think when you think you're an expert, you really close a lot of doors and you really stifle your learning and your knowledge. And, I don't have to be the smartest person. I don't have to know everything. You know what I have to do? I have to know who the smart people are, who I should gather
Yeah,
around my table. What kind of environment can I create where we can share information and learn from others and find the answers together? You know, the leaders don't have to know all the answers. They have to know the questions to ask. They have to know the people to invite to the table. They have to create a space of collaboration and mutual respect and learning from each other. And that's how we find the answers, not by knowing all the answers. It's by inviting the smart people to join you, to partner with you.
yeah. Yeah, that resonates with me because, we've had this chief influencer program for a couple of years now, and I've interviewed over 100 just incredible leaders, and I learned so much from them. And when I get to, answer people's questions out in the world about influence and personal branding and LinkedIn or all these topics, I find that it's not my advice. I'm just repeating things and I attribute it. And I'll
Yeah.
say, well, let me tell you what Mary told me. Let me tell you what Steve Taylor from the Arthritis Foundation told me. Let me tell you what Chuck Henderson from the ADA told me. And, it's like, it's a gift when you can share and amplify others' expertise. But also, I mean, another CEO is more likely to believe the advice that came from a CEO rather than Anthony, who's Anthony. So there's this opportunity to really amplify your influence when you do convene and elevate experts, I've found.
Absolutely. That's so true. And I think if we create an environment where we think we know everything or we're an expert, it just sets up a culture of perfectionism and something that you can't maintain. You can't be successful at. You can't succeed. It's a lot of pressure.
Well, it is a lot of pressure. What do you say to other nonprofit leaders who might feel that pressure to have all the answers because of their title?
What's that song? Let it go. Let it go. You realize you don't have to know everything. Again, you just need
Yeah.
to know who you need to surround yourself with. You need to find experts in areas that you need help in and create an environment of collaboration and sharing your knowledge with others and listening to their knowledge to help you lead a better organization, be a better
Right.
leader, and find answers for your community.
Yeah, very well said. I want to go back to NFED for a second. You've helped the organization grow into what's really a global community supporting families in more than 100 countries, 120 countries, I think. What do you think has been key to building that reach while also keeping the organization so personal and grounded? I mean, you shared earlier about, the direct communication that you're having with patients and families. So how have you found that balance, the reach with keeping it so
Well,
people
it,
focused and
it
grounded?
is an intentional building of a global community. You know, rare diseases, ectodermal dysplasias, they don't stop at our borders, right? Other
Yeah.
countries, equally affected by rare disorders, ectodermal dysplasias. And I find that just like with people, building trust and relationships with our sister organizations across the world. There's 17 other ectodermal dysplasias organizations across the world. Many of them are very small, maybe just starting, but our combined knowledge can really push our agenda in a much more powerful way than Mary Fete, the NFED in the United States can. Getting other perspectives, whether it's from other organizations, researchers across the world, clinicians, getting their input and their expertise as leaders and partnering with global entities, whether it's organizations or researchers, really pushes our agenda. What we know, then they know. What they know, we know. So we share information and we're much more successful. We have families across the world. We have to build ways to communicate, right? I mean, Zoom, now we can connect with international partners so much easier than we could in the past, right? There's even translation tools, AI or Google Translate. So, they solve the time change. I get up early, they stay up late. You have to figure out all that stuff to create an environment where we can really partner and collaborate internationally because
Yeah.
together we have to find answers for our families. Together, we will be much more successful than one organization alone. And there's so much more power in numbers.
I know that you're very intentional about making sure your families, your donors, your researchers all feel seen and valued. And I want to hear a little bit from you about how you instill that people first approach across the organization. And one thing that really kind of stuck with me that I thought you might want to talk about is how you use your donor database to also keep track of families so that you're bringing the same level of attention to those very different types of stakeholders as an organization. Can you share a little bit about that approach?
Sure. First, I'll start with the people first approach. It's very, very important to establish relationships of trust and respect. And so listening to people goes back to listening skills, right? Listening to people, where they're coming from, how we could partner with experts, whether they're researchers or clinicians, and not just tap into their expertise, but really become partners so that we can make a difference in patients' lives together, hear where they're coming from, and how we might work together and share our knowledge, our expertise to make the world a better place for individuals who are affected by rare disorders, to combine our efforts and with mutual respect, knowing that we have maybe different goals that are congruent and we can help each other meet those goals, right? As far as our database, 10,000 people in our database, right? I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of donors and it's impossible for me to pull that from my head all the time. So our database is a great tool that we track information, right? So that I really can get to know you as a donor and I know what's important to you. And so when I call you and I'm so grateful for the donation, I want to know you. I want to know about your family. It's a personal relationship for me. I want to know what your interests are so that when you make a donation, we we know what your priorities are. Yeah, same thing with families. We talk to a lot of families, and hard to remember whose kids are whose, right? When you have a lot of families on your database. And I want to know families personally so that when I do connect with them, I'll look at the database and, oh, that's right. John graduated from college this year. I remember, his mom telling me that. And this little jogging memories helps you remember and really connect on a more personal level. It's not that we use a database to form what I say or what I do, but it helps me nurture a more personal relationship, whether it's with families or donors. And our donors are very important to us. You can't do anything without money. And so
Yeah.
I'm so grateful and so genuinely um, grateful when we get any donation that I really want to make sure that I get to know our donors and that they know that I'm going to use those. We're going to use those donations very judiciously. And I can tell them what I used their donations for. So that's why the database is so helpful.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. And when I hear you talking about that, Mary, what just strikes me is that some organizations might have experienced that as they've leaned more on technology, like, we all have databases,
Right.
that it's caused their relationships to feel less personal because, it makes it easy to blast the same thing to 10,000 people. And the way that you describe how you're using your database, it almost even reminds me how sometimes political campaigns do it, where, they're keeping track of key data, like, you're talking about the milestones and the families, and they're using the technology to enhance the relationship and bring the people first approach rather than a technology first approach. And I just think cool to hear that.
That's a great way to describe it. It's not that we're using the technology to like automate everything or do anything. It's really helping us build relationships. And it's a very important, valuable tool to do this with, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have a photographic memory and you remember all the people you talked to.
Yes, there's a few of those people, but not too many of them. I'm certainly not one. Well, speaking of technology, I know that NFED recently launched an AI advisory group, which is, it's not something I've seen very many nonprofits or especially rare disease nonprofits do. And I wondered if you could talk about what prompted that decision and how it reflects your approach to innovation.
Well, we go back to that question where I can't be the expert of everything. I virtually know hardly anything about AI other than it, up until this, other than it exists. And it's probably something we need to wrap our heads around. We went to National Health Council meeting, Greg and myself, earlier this year, and there was some talk about AI and organizations learning about AI. And it was that point we thought we probably need to look at AI. We're small, nonprofit, and we need to learn how we can use this tool to amplify our efforts, right? Not to replace the human touch, not to replace, the heart of how we write or the heart of what we do, but to really expand what we can do, right? Because AI is pretty powerful, and a small organization can use it to actually do more work and to allow us to have more time for the important work like patient support, family connections, advocacy, research. And since we don't know everything, we decided we'd develop this committee and we'd call in the experts around our table. We call it experts that could help us frame our AI strategy in a very ethical way and in a way that really will help our families and allow us to do more. So I think that it was a smart move because I think that they will be able to help us put a framework around AI and educate our staff on the best tools, the to help our families in a very ethical way. And so we're learning as we go. We're very fortunate. We have found the right people to invite to our table to help us develop our strategy. I'll keep you
I
posted
thi
on that.
Yeah, have there been any, and there may not be that you can share, but just have there been any key insights that have come out of that so far?
I think the key insights were that it's good to think proactively about it, and I think we will be developing guidelines and how we use AI and looking at the right tools to use and how we move forward. So I think we're just
Yeah,
beginning to write our guidelines. And
yeah.
actually, one of our experts says, AI can help you write those guidelines. Yeah. Like annotate. So, and Greg is really the lead on the AI committee, and he's pretty progressive, and so I think it's a great opportunity for the NFED, and it's smart to look at it up front before you're in the middle of things and you've lost a handle on which
Yeah,
you know.
100%. Well, along those lines of just innovation, I wanted to ask you about and make sure I'm saying it right, the EDE Life clinical trial for XLHED, which represents a major breakthrough for the families that are affected. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about NFED's role in that effort and, what makes it so significant.
Well, I'm going to try really hard to put a 30-year story into a snippet. So I
Okay.
mentioned our founder. She was so visionary. And early on, some 30 years ago, she thought it was so important that the NFED fund research and get involved in research. And so 30 years ago, the NFED funded the researchers that identified the causative gene for XLHED, which is one of the more common, probably the most common ectodermal dysplasias. So once I identified the gene, it opened up pathway to learn more about the cause and what happens, learn about the pathways, those mechanisms, those chain of events that lead to normal development of hair, teeth, sweat glands, skin. And so once they understood the pathways, there were some researchers in Switzerland who identified the protein and made a synthetic protein. We funded that research. Small nonprofit gave seed money to those researchers to develop that. They tested it in mice, and then again, we funded a dog colony for a researcher at University of Pennsylvania who had a colony of dogs that naturally were affected by ectodermal dysplasias, which I thought was fascinating. And her research helped us learn more about the respiratory involvement of this syndrome and development of teeth. And so we funded that research. And then things progressed, and we worked with a couple pharmaceutical companies. We had some disappointments. We had some setbacks, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you have to be invested in the long haul for research. And so some couple years later, there was a pharma company that bought the rights. It was Edinburgh Pharmaceuticals, and they developed this protein and developed clinical trials to better learn about the natural history of the syndrome. Our families participated in this research. We supported this research. We educated our families on this research. And they finally got to the point where they got approval and to do safety trials with this protein in adults, and then finally to give it to newborns. And what we found out is that it's too late to give it in newborns. It didn't make the impact. That wasn't really a failure because we learned so much through their clinical trials. So again, looking for another pharma company to take it up another couple of years. And then finally, Esperer, which is a foundation, a rare disease foundation in Europe that funds rare disease. Their mission is to find treatments and cures for rare disease. They bought the rights. And eventually, they partnered with Pierre Fabre, and thus we had clinical trials. But actually, before the clinical trials were started officially, there is a program in Germany. They can give that treatment when they have enough evidence that it's safe and can be effective. And 2 women from the United States traveled to Germany during COVID. We supported their travel, and they were treated. And then after that, clinical trials started. 10 babies have been treated. The treatment is given before birth in utero, in significant weeks. And so 10 babies have been treated. 3 are from the United States. And so results are very promising. Mothers report that their babies sweat. Now, we don't have scientific analysis of the clinical trial, so it's, early to say, but early results show that their babies sweat normally. And, you probably take sweating for granted. I take sweating for granted. But it's significant. It's life-threatening if you don't sweat, especially in this heat wave that we've had, right?
Yeah.
So this shows, it's a powerful story. It's a beautiful story. It shows how a small nonprofit can drive research in their area. It's a huge success for our community. And with some luck, in a year or so, it'll be in market. It'll be available for treatment.
Wow.
It's groundbreaking. It's the first such treatment for a developmental disorder and given it in utero.
The power of persistence and the long game, because, this journey started over 30 years ago.
Yeah. That's just it. You can't be in it for the short run. You have to be in it for the long run.
Yeah. And, research, clinical trials, setbacks, but now seeing promising results with, babies who have gotten this in utero before they're even born, and knowing that you could provide this protein treatment, like a synthetic protein that addresses a genetic disorder. I mean, it's pretty incredible to hear about it, and must feel incredible to be part of it.
I guess to be part of it. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever envision that I'd be part of something like this, and to have the opportunity to collaborate and partner with these researchers to really make a significant impact for our community.
What are you hearing from your families about this?
Well, I think families are very optimistic. They're very excited that, there's a breakthrough for one ectodermal dysplasia. And I always say, if it can happen for one, there's hope that we will at some point have treatments for all of the ectodermal dysplasias. It's not a cure because it doesn't change the genetic pattern, but it replaces the missing protein. So, and it's a huge decision for these mothers.
Yeah.
It's a huge decision. Our role is not to recruit patients for clinical trials. The NFED's role is to provide the education, the resources, so moms can make an informed decision, so they know what their options are, so that they can make this decision with the best available information. That's our job.
So I want to ask you, NFED, you focus on ectodermal dysplasias, of course, but you're part of a broader movement around rare diseases. And I wonder, how do you focus or how do you balance, rather, your focus on ectodermal dysplasias and the families that you serve with the need to build coalitions across the rare disease community so that rising tide lifts all boats?
So at the NFED, we see our work as deeply focused. It's mission-driven. And I find myself asking that question several times a week. Are we focusing on our mission? Is this new program mission-driven? But we know that we have to be connected much more broadly, because the things that our families are challenged with, finding a diagnosis, being misdiagnosed, getting the health care they need, access to care, struggles with insurance, all of those things, they're not limited to our community. Everybody in the rare disease space faces those challenges. So we have to connect with the rare disease community so that our voices are more powerful. So together we can advocate for funding for research, and we could advocate for policy change. We have to work together to get this done. And an example of it in our organization is the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act, right? We partner with more than 70 other organizations to support this policy. change. And if that's just one example, right? Advocating for research dollars from NIH for rare diseases, trying to find answers and solutions. So we know we need to be focused, but we can't live in a silo. We can't just focus on ectodermal dysplasias. We know that probably some of the treatments or some of the research that is applicable for ectodermal dysplasia may go across other disease states. So when we work together and we pool our knowledge and we share information, we're so much more powerful. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The rare disease community is such a powerful, patient-driven community. People share. If people need information on XYZ or a policy on using AI or whatever it is, we share across the space. We meet together at national meetings, and it's very powerful. So I think it's so important that we continue. And I really think the only way people at rare disease organizations are going to be successful in the future is even more collaboration and even more sharing across disease spaces.
You mentioned policy, and I know advocacy is a really important part of your work, from your family advocacy committee to the Stand Together conference. What have you learned about helping families turn their very personal stories into public impact?
Well, the most important thing is to help families understand they are the experts. They lived this challenge. They're the experts. And their stories are so powerful that they can drive policy change and they can drive research efforts. They have to know that they have the power. And it's not always easy, right? You have to create a space that you can help people share their stories. Once they know they're the experts in this area and they know their voice can be heard and should be heard, you have to make it a little easier for them. Maybe create templates or blogs where they can learn to write their story and be involved. You have to create a safe space, whether it's on a webinar or on our advocacy day, and you have to make sure they're comfortable sharing their story at the right time and when they're ready. But I think even the most shy person, people that really don't want to talk about it, once they know that they hold that power, that they're the experts, they're willing to share their story. And when they hear legislators listen to them and really consider their story, it's so powerful. And it's really one story at a time, right? It's not me going on Capitol Hill. I do, and I share collectively our stories, but they have the power to drive change.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to ask you, Mary, is I know your time with NFED is going to be coming to an end soon. And as you prepare for your final family conference as executive director, what are the moments that you'll carry with you, and what do you hope your legacy will be with this organization?
Well, my last family conference, kind of bittersweet, right? Kind of happy, sad. I am so happy because we have a team. Our staff is the most amazing staff. They're dedicated, they're knowledgeable, and I'm proud to leave with such a great staff. We're strong financially, and we've built networks and collaborations with researchers and organizations. So I feel like I'm leaving the organization in good shape, and so I'm happy about that. It is sad to think about this as my last conference, but I'll remember. I'll be a part of this community forever. They'll always be in my heart. I remember every moment of family conference, and so it's kind of a happy, sad thing. And my legacy. It's kind of funny to me that I'm being interviewed as a chief influencer. I really don't think I'll be remembered as a chief influencer or this amazing, earth-shattering leader. What I hope to be remembered for is that I led with my heart, I cared very deeply. I listened to our families, and I made decisions based on their needs. That their story was important to me, and I'm hoping that I made an impact, right? Not so much. I mean, of course, I want to make an impact in research and treatment, but I want to be remembered as making an impact in people's lives. Maybe one small thing changed and made a life better. And that, I empowered people to share their story and give them a voice, and that no family, no individual is alone. We are a community, we're a family. And I hope I built that kind of community. And I hope that's what I'm remembered for. And, I mentioned our founder a couple times, and uh, unfortunately, she died a couple years ago. And I was thinking about this, is that would she be proud of this organization today? Would she be proud of what I've done? And you know what? I think she would have been, and she
Uh,
is. And that makes me happy.
I think there are many people who will agree that you have made an incredible impact on their lives and the lives of others. And as I reflect on the conversation that we've had today, Mary, on Chief Influencer, we started talking about the power of listening. And you gave a really important anecdote, a story about just listening to someone when you were a nurse in the hospital, and taking the time to do that really put you in the position that you could make a positive impact on their life. And you certainly hadn't imagined at that point that you'd be the executive director of a rare disease nonprofit. But when we talked about some of your superpowers as a leader and what your team told us, this ability to bring the experts together, to not always want to be the expert in the room, despite so much expertise that you have, but to bring the experts together. And how do you unlock that power of the experts, whether they're scientists and researchers or whether they're the families with the lived experiences? And well, it goes back to where you started, the power of listening, showing people that you care by listening to them, allowing them to unleash that expertise that they have, and then making sure that they understand the power of their expertise, the power of their own influence, which you talked about with families. They need to understand that they are the experts and that they can influence policymakers, for example. But again, it all goes back to listening. So I thought this was just such a great conversation. There were so many pearls of wisdom for our
You know what?
community.
One more thing. You know what? I learned more from this community. They gave me more than I've given. And I am incredibly honored to be part of this community and have that opportunity. And it's a gift.
That's very special. Well, Mary, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. We're just so pleased that we had the opportunity to meet you and connect with you and feature you as a chief influencer. And like I said, I think that there are many people in your own community and beyond that know now the power influence that you've had for a whole community, but often through your personal touch and the power of listening. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.